You're the art teacher here at the high school?
Yes, I've taught here 10 years now, so it's a growing experience, but the kids are, what I found with the kids, are more hands-on, and they like pottery, they love the blacksmithing, anything that they can feel tactile and experience working with their hands, they love it. So far we've got Bob Montgomery, the blacksmith, out here. He's been showing the kids, he's going through a lot of history with blacksmithing, showing the kids the blacksmithing techniques, and then allowing the kids to make a hook themselves so they get the experience of knowing what a blacksmith does and kind of like the trade and how it works in the Appalachian Mountains, and kind of getting the backstory of the history of the blacksmith.
Well, the reason we make the hook is because the hook is the most basic, or one of the most basic things that we can make, but it involves everything that you do if you make bigger projects, because it's got to be heated, it's got to be bent, it's got to be twisted, it's got to be hammered, and it's got to be quenched or cooled off. So that little hook involves all of those things. So it is literally a little three-dimensional sculpture. It's a little sculpture project.
A lot of people want to make swords. I'm sure that's something that's close to everybody's hearts. That's why everybody likes those, because they have signs on all the schools that say no weapons. But you don't really get to start making swords. You get to start making something like this. Now, I make a lot of dragons, and one of the reasons that this is a good project is because that dragon, although it's a lot more complicated than this, it requires, both of these things require the same exercise in order to complete the project. It's got to be heated, okay? It's got to be hammered, it's got to be twisted or whatever, and you got to have the right kind of tools. This is a forge, this is a blower. In order to have combustion, you got to have fuel, and I'm burning charcoal. You got to have fuel and you got to have oxygen, and this blower generates the oxygen, okay? It forces it into the fire and makes it hotter. I can increase the temperature of that fire by about 1,000 degrees by blowing on it. So the secret, if you're a blacksmith, is managing the fire. That's what the whole thing's about. And what you have to do is you have to determine when the metal is ready to be hammered by the color. So of all the metals, gold, silver, bronze, aluminum, whatever, iron's the only one that changes color as it gets hot. So for 1,000 degrees there's no color, and then red, and then orange, and yellow, and white. So orange, which is about 1,800 degrees, is the temperature that we're going with. That's not quite as hot as I would like it if I were working by myself, but it's safe. If I get it up much hotter than that, there's always a danger that it could splatter if you get too hot.
You know, he was very, making sure everyone felt comfortable. I'm not going to lie, I'm a very girly girl, and I kept missing the piece of metal on the anvil, and now he makes me feel very comfortable.
So, go across the anvil, you're going to get down until it's against the side, and then when I turn it over, it'll be sticking up good down on top. Here's what we have to do. We have to get the whole thing hot, and we're going to come across the horn of the anvil, give him the hammer, and you're going to have to hit on this to bend it around the horn. What's going to happen to the part that I just worked on if the whole thing's hot and you hit it with a hammer? Well, it's going to mess it up, isn't it? So what can I do to this? Because I have to bend it. What can I do to this so that I can bend this whole thing around the horn without messing the end up?
Get it really hot.
Get it really hot.
Dip over in water.
Get it melted.
Guys, if this was a science class, we'd be talking about the scientific method. You guys know what the scientific method is? Yeah, problem solving, right? That's a scientific name for problem solving. So we know the problem. That's been stated we have to have a hypothesis, right? Or several hypotheses. So the hypothesis is, your idea is what? Where's the end of the water? You guys believe me?
Yeah.
So what do you do with a hypothesis if you're dealing with a scientific method? You test it, okay? So we're going to pull the end of it, and I want you to drive it around the horn. Get right there. Right on the end of it. There we go. Good. So, go across the end, we're going to get down until it's against the side, and then when I turn it over, it'll be sticking up good down top. And then we put it back in this little, one of the tools I have, and twist it. So it's a very simple process.
And I really thought this would just be something cool to make my own kind of hook, and just, you know, something I could have around the house to remind me I can make my own things and do things that I want to do. But it'd be like a nice thing to like just to nail to my wall, or just to like look at and, you know, just remember the day when I made it and stuff like that. The way I like to think about it is art conveys a story no matter what. Through song lyrics with instruments, through blacksmithing with iron, through writing, acting, and drawing, and sculpting. You're telling a story no matter what. And I feel like art is just a human experience that no one can really deny. You can do sports and academics, and those help with many things, but I feel like art truly helps you tell the story that you want to be heard. I do believe that there's so much art, especially in Kentucky, that we just don't acknowledge sometimes. We have a lot of opera, a lot of artistic woodwork, and blacksmithing, which I consider an art myself. And I think that like nowadays a lot of people are starting to realize that there's plenty of beautiful, amazing artists in Hazard and in Kentucky as well. And I think it's good that we're finally acknowledging it and teaching it in schools.
Well, for me, like, but when you start hurting and you have to face the fact that life sucks sometimes, you have that like you can turn what sucks into something so awesome and so creative. It's so cool. It really is. Many aspects of life.
To me, I feel like art is a necessity. Like, I feel like there are just a certain amount of kids who can only put themselves through art, and are not into athletics, and they're not into academics, but they are into art, and it should be considered a necessity instead of just something you can throw away, because you're ignoring a certain part of your students who could learn through these achievements of art and acting, and even backstage work. Those are just as important as acting, and I consider them an art in my place too. So I just believe that like you should stop considering art as something you can throw away.
And again, for like teachers, like there are so many kids that struggle with mental illness and like struggle with suicidal thoughts, and a lot of kids aren't going to come out and tell their teacher, hey, I'm struggling with this, hey, I need help. But if you look at someone's art, you can see like, hey, like I'm reaching out, like, hey, I need help, and that teacher can pick up on that, and I think that's a huge deal.
So do you think there's an advantage to having like visiting artists coming in?
I think so. The kids get to see a outside perspective. They get to see somebody different, and they've had a lot of experience outside. Like because Bob, he's actually worked at the horse park and things like that, shoeing horses, and that was his experience with blacksmithing before he actually started doing the residency. Then he has his own forge down in Berea, or his own shop. Blacksmith shop.
I went to middle school at the county schools, and I didn't have art, really. We colored, but when I came here freshman year and had Miss Thompson, it completely changed and like kind of just lit a fire and a passion for art that I didn't always have. And what was so cool about him in particular is when you speak to someone, you can realize that they're passionate about what they're doing by the way they talk about it. And you can tell like how his eyes light up and how he just loves like yeah, me personally, I thought it was fascinating, but yeah, like it's not for me that I would want to do regularly. But seeing someone that is so passionate about something that they do, it's awesome.
And when you guys get to be famous blacksmiths, like me, or musicians, the first thing you have to get is a pair of Ray-Bans.
Yeah, Ray-Ban.
Ray-Bans. Okay, that's the first thing.
What?
Ray-Bans. Sunglasses. Like this. Can't. His name's Blind Lemon Pledge, man. He's a saxophone player.
But do you have a pair?
I've got 2 pairs. I just don't wear them when I'm working.
You get a pair of Ray-Ban safety goggles.
You got it. Blacksmiths and dragons are joined at the hip. You know, we've always been that way.